morning, everyone. Thank you for being in the talk after the party. I really appreciate that. I had to bail out at 12 yesterday, so I'm a little bit prepared for today. I guess the first thing I want to know is who said like I'm going to go to the talk despite that bullshit bingo title. It's like I have the feeling that I won the bullshit bingo at this conference, right? I tried to put as many buzzwords in here to get the people to attracted to the talk. That said, I'm going to try to motivate it and I hope convince you that the title itself is a little bit catchy, but it's not totally bullshit. I had a couple of conversations during the last couple of days, and I think the background, at least if I look my personal background and background to others, is very diverse, right? And especially if you're in the infrastructure space, then you have some maybe prejudice or thoughts about serverless, or, about the big player Amazon doing things, and also maybe some good points in that. But what I would like you to do for at least the first half an hour or something, put that away, and just look at this topic with a fresh mind. Like put your day job away. Put the things away, what you do in a counter, and what you like about open source, and just put everything away and start with a fresh mind and think, okay, there is this serverless thing, and I know probably what's Agile and how do these things work together, and then I'm happy to discuss everything that you think is good or bad about it, but start with a fresh mind. So, a little bit about myself. So, I've been doing software development since roughly around 2005. I'm not that, so my father tried to buy me a computer, or bought me a computer, but that turned out to be just gaming. I didn't really hack too much. He bought me a book about Visual Basic, on a QBasic back in the day. I tried to read it, didn't catch at that time. I was playing. So, actually, I started programming when going to university. I started electrical engineering. That also didn't really turn out. I wanted to program. Back in the day, it was Flash websites. Made a ton of money with it. Worked for 2 days and I had money for the month. That was great. And came into development. And then I joined a company, and we were all about Agile. Consultant programming, Agile, extreme programming back in the day, then switched to Scrum and did all the consultancy stuff. Then that got a little bit boring, and I wanted to do more technology, so I joined a couple of startups. I got into the whole container space, so I'm actually not that of an OS guy. I'm more on the developer side of things, and that's where when I met people from Red Hat in the container space, and I said, well, you need to do something with containers, so I joined Red Hat. During the last year, I learned more and more about serverless, and got really excited about it, and some of these history and some of my learnings is in this talk. So yeah, if you want to ping me on anything, it's probably everywhere. Luebken on the internet. Yeah, and recently I joined a new startup again. It's called Instana, and if you are interested in anything that has to do with distributed monitoring of applications, I'm happy to talk about that. Okay. So roughly, this is the agenda. Trying to define a little bit the terms, what I'm talking about, what I'm not talking about. Going to motivate a little bit what happened when I was going through the community, listening to stories, and then what are the practices that I at this point of time see, and it's obviously, one shot on things, and there are so many more to come, and I just have like a very little peek, and maybe half of them are wrong or not. Well, we can see. Okay. The first question to the audience in the morning: what is the biggest risk for a software project?
Deadline.
What?
Deadline.
Deadlock.
Deadline.
Deadline. Okay. Scope 3. Huh?
Nobody uses it.
Nobody uses it. Okay.
Not addressing the real need for anybody actually.
Real need?
Not addressing.
Not addressing a need. Okay.
Over design.
Over design. This is my answer, that we're not building the right thing, not addressing the need. I mean, at least from my experience, right, there's so many things looking through different projects, and there's always, there's deadlines, there's technical creep, we're building too much or anything, but in the end is like, are we actually building the right thing? Are we making whomever the customer is happy? And are we actually solving a problem? Now, how are you making sure to do this? Like, what do you do to make sure that you're building the right thing? Talking to engineers here, yeah. Like, who cares? I got the requirements, come on.
Validate stakeholders.
Validate with stakeholders. So, yeah, some kind of stakeholder, someone came into the project and gave the requirements, talking with them, validating them. How do you validate that? Talk to customers. Okay. Okay. Uh-huh.
You can start with the proof of concept.
Proof of concept, POCs. Mm-hmm.
Working in an agile way.
What? Working in an agile way. How does working in an agile way help? Unit tests? Okay. Right. What do you do with the incremental steps? Right. You want to deliver software, right? You want to small increments, put them into the customer. Like, what do you think? Right? Talk with them. Right? Interview them. Yeah, please.
Also, you can say, am I actually solving a problem of mine? So if I'm thinking about the right thing to solve a problem, is it a problem I'm actually facing, and that can benefit the community?
Right. Dog fooding, kind of like, am I solving a problem for myself? So I don't know if you know, but Basecamp, the folks around Ruby on Rails. That's part of their success. That project management sucked and project management software sucked. So we built something for ourselves, and then it turned to be like a product that everyone will use. Yeah. So I think there are many things that you want to talk about. Right? You want to talk to experts. You want interviews. You do some POCs, mock-ups, small iterations, small experiments. If someone has heard about the lean startup movement, they do like the concierge MVPs, which is like you do something but you actually don't implement it. You somehow fake it, and then if someone hits you, you do it by yourself, and that way you learn. Right? There's actually no software running in the back end. So there's a couple of things. Now, my question is like what and something to really. Something that's problematic, or one of the challenges is that we have, and if you look at your project and you compare that to let's say Apple, right? They build something or they do something very secretively, and then they put it out and it's a blast and nobody knew about it before, and it changes not the world, but it's like a big mile, like a big leap. And here we are in this agile world trying to experiment all the time with customers. Are we solving our own problem? Are we solving the customer's problem? And, the truth is it's not that easy. It's not that easy to talk to a customer and say, like, what do you want? right? There's this famous saying, if I would talk to customers, we would only have faster horses, not cars, right? Because sometimes you don't know what you want. What you do know is this solving a problem for me? Like if I'm building something and I'm using something, and is this now solving a problem? I'm experimenting, I'm working with it a little bit, but is this solving problems in my day-to-day life? And you know what? At the end of the day, we can do mock-ups, we can do experiments, but at the end of the day, you really figure this out if you really build a software and you can use it. So my question is, what about you are building a real MVP, like a real product, and really put it in front of the users? So this is an example that I encountered. And by the way, the slides are online. I tweeted them. I have a short link at the end of the slides. So please take pictures if you want, or just relax and read, and every slides are online. So that's a small startup. 2 people. And I don't know about the time frame, but when my co-founder and I started Moodadoo, our goals seemed far too ambitious for them. We wanted to build an email client, to-do list, Kanban board, calendar, all working together in one app, real-time collaboration on all platforms and desktop and mobile. If I would do this in any project, I said, like, okay, we need 50 people. This is going to take us 2 years, right? This would be my first estimate, right? There's no, I could not imagine to do this in any way. So how did they do this? And I don't know if you can read this, but basically they built on top of Google, on top of Gmail, and built everything, with existing services within Google. And you could argue, well, it's another interface to Google, but at the end of the day, their customers, they don't care, right? In engineering, we talk a lot about, we build a lot of things, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of things. At the end of the day, do we solve a problem? Does the customer care? And yes, sometimes, you're working in Red Hat, and it's very important to build the infrastructure. You're having some, different customers. But, if you're solving, some interface, some user interface, the back end is unimportant. The customer doesn't care whether this runs on Google or not. They care about if it solves a problem. Now, if you're doing some B2B or evaluating, further, then the infrastructure, the privacy, there's a lot of concerns they need to encounter. But are we solving the right problem? Are we solving users' problems? They validated with this, right? And that's 2 people. So, and this is like one story, and there are many others, and there are many other startups, building with these kind of technologies, and just building higher order value systems and solving some problems for the user. And I was wondering, what can we, if you're not a startup, if you're not like a startup in the consumer space, but more like in an in-house or more like a traditional enterprise B2B epic, what can we learn about it? And especially in the regards of like these upcoming serverless technologies, which I'm going to define in a minute. But what these technologies that bubble up, what can we learn about it? What can we potentially leverage? Before we start, the first thing I need to do is defining Agile. And this slide was actually not on it, but I talked to a former colleague of mine, and we were talking about a former project, and he said, "Yeah, but our team was Agile," and I said, "No." And he was no, we were doing, well, I don't know, it was Agile, yeah. And I said, "No." And he was pissed. And then I realized, oh no, you were doing great stuff. You had a great engineering team. You and your colleagues did awesome work. I didn't mean to, it was not your fault. But you know what? You didn't do Agile. But that's okay. In your setting, you need to that you did the best you could do, and some of the things you couldn't actually change. So it's important to let people understand like what I mean with agile, and let people know that agile is one way of doing it. You're not doing something wrong if you're doing something else. So if you talk to people and talking to that one colleague, he could probably do a checklist here. We did stand up, we did sprint planning, we had a Scrum Master, right? Oh, we're agile, right? This is Scrum. Half of it is Scrum, Extreme Programming, TDD, and things. That's a lot of practices, and it's a good framework for many people to start, but it doesn't cut it. That's not agile. That's just like a couple of terms, a couple of consultants, an easy thing to do, but it's not to the core of it. Who has seen this website before? Okay. Read it again, pull it up, and think about, like, if you're doing some agile, am I still within this website? Am I still within agile? And again, if you're not, I'm not saying that it's whether good or bad, but I'm saying like this is the important stuff, right? The original Agile Manifesto. And yes, you can on some things you wanna how good and appropriate these are today. We can talk about it. But many of these things, you can do this without a Scrum Master, without TDD, and without stand-ups. And it's, from my point of view, still agile. Now, if you scroll down, and many people, I don't know, do this. Who has seen this Who has seen this one? Great, 4, right? So everyone else, Agile Manifesto, read the Agile Manifesto, scroll down, and then there's a link to the principles. Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. Right? Get the thing out of the door, get the things. And this is what I care about. And if we as a project don't deliver that, everything else I don't care about. If we're doing stand-ups, retrospectives, whatever if we have a Scrum Master, 2 product owners, and an Agile cat, I don't give a shit, right? If we don't deliver value to the customer, like, we're doing something wrong. So, if I'm talking about supercharging Agile with serverless, I'm thinking like, how does this help me to deliver faster software? Serverless. So, yes, there are servers. Yeah. I'm not unfortunately I'm going home today, so we can't have beers over this tonight. There are servers. Duh. And for all the containers, I'm also a container fanboy. There are containers that run these, right? So, we did a talk yesterday about, containers versus serverless. You still need containers, right? That's a very good means of, building serverless frameworks. So, I'm not going to argue with you about this tonight. But there are other things that we need to look into to understand where this whole serverless movement is coming from and where it is leading and what it implies. So if you look at the different definitions and different teams, it's actually a little bit, the first thing that you want to differentiate about is that many people, if you're looking at serverless in the sense of writing small functions and sending them to some cloud provider that they run it, that's actually more precisely claimed with FaaS, functions as a service. So I have small code, I send it over, and I actually have no idea. I can retrospect or look into where the machine is running, and I can see this is the limitations of the underlying system. But in the end, I don't know that. I don't have means of changing that. I give function code, and someone runs it. Interestingly, my personal opinion, if you think about the evolvement or the history of these things, or where it got really popular, was by Amazon Lambda. And they started using this as glue code for their existing services, right? You have existing services which you wanted to enrich, and you wanted to make these services better, and and that's something also that Chris Wright said in the keynote on Friday, is that it's not so much the functions as a service. The functions itself is the easy part. I mean, it's still very powerful in my point of view, but it's the easy part. The interesting part in serverless is how this is connecting to other services, how the events show up, and what you can do to stitch these all things together and build something more powerful. So, some use the backend as a service, fully managed services, and the other part you need to think, be aware of that these small functions are somehow connected, and that's event-based. Different vendors have now tooling to make it easier, but event-based, you're thinking about you have to do a little bit like mind shift in the system and the way you think about these things. The event-driven system is very important. We had a discussion yesterday about someone, using Django, and how does that fit into the new model? What would change, etc. And this is at this point of time, if you want to have a real definition and want to, compare that to others, and when you say, okay, this is serverless or not. At this point of time, I think Mike Roberts did a good job. So just going over them briefly. Serverless, traits of serverless. It does not require managing a long-lived server application instance, so I'm not managing anything. Okay. Self-auto-scales and auto-provisions based on load, right? So if more things turn up, it's, I get more resources. And offers costs based on precise usage up from and down to zero usage. If you are not using, if you're not using your functions, you're not getting it paid. And that's something very, very different, and something that I think will change a lot of things, dynamics in software development, because you now can suddenly say, okay, this service, right, this MVP is not going to get used. It's not used, so it doesn't cost me anything, so I can shut it down. And I will talk about that a little bit more, but there is more to it than just that it's cheaper. It's not about the cheaper part. It's the way that if it's not getting used, you're not going to get paid. Has performance capabilities defined in others than host and size, right? If you don't manage a server, then you have other performance other terms where you have the performance capability, and that it scales, auto scales. It has implicit availability. All right, there are a couple of fast providers. Not going to go in the detail. There are a couple of open source versions. Red Hat is actively investing in OpenWhisk, and I said that on Friday. There are many drawbacks in the public versions, so let's do it better, right? Amazon has their commercial interest. There are a lot of things that the open source version could do better. So go for it. So a couple of stories from the community, why this got me going, right? So I wrote one application for myself, and I did a lot of learnings. But, in the end, I'm one guy, trying to look around, and I just looked what others did. So this is the first one, Paul Johnston, and he's now at AWS, but back in the day, he was, he was CTO for one startup. And he found, it was very interesting for him how he built a serverless application, and that, many try to claim that, but he actually felt that he spent much more time on the business logic, right? He was actually building the application and not so caring much about the technology. The reasoning for that was, typical no server as setup, that this whole, managing of things was easier. These, smaller steps turned out to smaller problems, so, didn't have the big bang problems. Erica Windish from IOPipe, and this is another thing that, that's like, that I didn't hear somewhere else and caught very much my attention. She talks about a serverless culture, And she talks, and it's actually one of the practices that I think we're going to see more, is that in a serverless culture you talk about like, don't build when you can buy. Don't reuse something that there is existing. And this is something we are trying to do in the software industry since ever, right? Since like the beginning of time, we're trying to modularize things and reuse things, and we are very, very bad at it. And maybe this serverless things, maybe it helps us there. So something that caught my attention. And the other one, and this is more or less a must-read for anyone like deeply interested in the serverless space. Why the fuss about serverless? So Simon Wardley is a strategist. He put Ubuntu in the cloud, and he built actually a startup in 2005, which didn't have the name on fast back in the day, but actually was. And what he argues about, he has these Wardley maps where he discusses strategy, and they're quite nice actually. But the point is that he says the serverless movement will change the practices built on top of that. So the way we're doing software development, the way we're doing DevOps is going to change. All right. So, looked into it and tried to assemble a couple of these. And again, I'm not claiming, and I should probably put a disclaimer on here. These are, my thoughts as of today. And when I was doing the slides, I was actually saying, maybe I should rephrase this one to the other, and maybe we should combine these two. So, it's a first shot, and I'm really looking for your feedback on, what do you say? Does it make sense? Are they applicable or not? But here are a couple of emerging practices that I see. And I, at this point, so actually when I thought about these, I thought back to extreme programming, and they had a very sophisticated model where, you had to do, a little bit like the basic practices. And before you didn't do these well in a certain way, you couldn't expand. You couldn't expand to the advanced, or you shouldn't expand to the advanced practices. And thinking about that, many of these Scrum teams should actually read the extreme programming books. There's a lot of know-how in there, a lot of things. So anyway, I thought some of the things are actually kind of basic, or you could start with them, or you probably, if you're doing serverless, you get exposed to them anyway. And some of them are actually, you really need to decide on doing this. So it's not that easy. Okay, let's go through these. The first one I find interesting is that fast itself is constraining yourself, right? The first thing, if you talk to I had the conversation with Vajek. The first thing that you see is that functions are limited. Containers are so much more versatile. Right? We had this slide where fast is like this hammer, and containers are like you can do everything. Now that's true, and many resource limits. The first thing that you need, need to understand or to remind yourself is that these limits enable the cloud providers to give you the other traits. That it scales down from 0, and that's actually the way it is. But the interesting, or something that I'm thinking about and hearing and experiencing myself, is that maybe these limits are actually helping you focus, and not setting a new, building another container. Right, another base image, and caring about the latest, greatest version. You're just using that Node.js version. And yes, there might be some features which might be a little bit fancier, but that's you're again drifting away of the focus on building your software. So and the other important piece is and this is kind of tricky because you can take either sides of it, but if you have your existing application you can't just throw that into a FAS, right? Your application, it times out after 5 minutes. You only can upload 50 megabytes, so you need to re-architect it. And we can argue about that all night, whether that's good or bad. But at the end of the day, like if you're building a good application, you want to have it modularized, right? You want to have different parts of the system, whether it's serverless or not. But serverless is forcing you, right? And again, I don't know about the terms, but I put freedom here again because yes, it's constrained. At the same time, if you're opening up to some cloud provider or some system, the actual teams do have the freedom to start something up right away. There's no more waiting, asking for something. You might have limits on how much you can use, but if you have functions, a FAS, and you have backend services that also provisioned by also cost you only as much as you need, there's no reason why your manager, your company shouldn't force you to not use it, right? You need to understand the implications, etc. But there's no more budgeting, right? So it's freedom, it's constrained, but you could still open up. Okay, first one. Next one, decoupling architecture, and I was alluding to that a little bit earlier. We are very bad at decoupling, and the interesting piece is that with serverless, you are not only, a certain modularization is needed because of the, resource constraints, but even more with the cost, you're actually incentivized to modularize, right? If only one part, or like if only 1/10 of your application is consuming and doing all the work, you need to, and then splitting these up and having these two functions call together, and you're actually just, having the smaller one running all the time or running more often, you can actually like decouple these and have a more modularized system. It's funny that the infrastructure is actually forcing me to be more modular. And for those who want to read it up on this, Gojko Ajic actually did a paper on this, on the economic incentives and the economic and architectural impact from serverless, and it's a very good read. And yeah, he talks about this a lot. All right, tiny teams. This is also something that I'm passionate about with my agile background and different setups in different teams that I've seen. Team composition is hard, right? And all the agile processes that ignore these are, I just like, it's stupid, right? Just, impose one process and then say, be done with it. And I don't care about the individuals. And, it's obviously stupid. But something that, listening to talks, talking to different people, one thing that came up is that you actually can build stuff with less people. You can actually, there's not the 2 pizza teams anymore. That's the 1 pizza team. You can actually do a lot of good, stuff with 3 to 5 people. There's a talk from Guild on the last reInvent, and they said their typical team size is now 3 to 5. And back in the day, at least, when I was trying to structure teams, it was more around like, 3 to 5, you are probably not going to get done as much as you want, right? You need more people. I'm wondering, like, what will happen if you work with smaller teams? If you can get the same thing done with less people, you have a better team structure, less communication overhead, maybe more communication, but a more collaborative way. And while researching on this, I actually found it rather interesting that there is an extreme programming technique where they say, There's Agile and extreme programming. It's always about making things better, right? You reiterate on things, and trying to improve. Now, what do you do with a team? Like you have 7 people. Now, what do you do with these 7 people? Where do you improve, right? And you usually say, okay, we're going to do, we're going to provide more value. We're going to provide more software. The quality is higher. We're going to get faster. Blah 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 blah. But Kent Beck and Cynthia Andres, they suggested to shrink teams, right? What if we deliver some value, and then during the course of the evolution of the team, we actually can get this done with less people, right? And this technique is, I don't know, it's like 10 years old or something, but no, maybe we see a connection there. Pure DevOps. The next thing that there is in this whole DevOps, serverless, cloud thing, there's a blog post, forgot the name, from Netflix back in the day, Adrian Cockcroft, and he talked about no ops, right? And again, a catchy title, and all the ops people go bazinga and say, wow, I'm still useful, right? Not say the developers, they can't do it on their own, so there is ops needed. And yes, right, obviously the no ops was stupid, and if you read through the article, there's an update on the back end where Adrian says yeah, you're right, no ops is a stupid term, let's forget it, but now it sticks. Anyway, ops is still needed. There are many other things that many cross-functional concerns which me as a developer, I have no clue about, right? We had that, I don't know, somewhere yesterday, the conversation about security. And yeah, I know I shouldn't, but I'm not good at security. I don't know this stuff, right? You really need to be an expert on it. So many other topics. The point is, these are changing, right? It might not be that you have a dedicated person setting up a server or something, but there are different topics that you need to take care of. And the interesting piece is with serverless, there is something that operability is there from the start. So from the very beginning, if I'm writing my functions, I'm thinking about how this runs. And where DevOps tries to collaborate between the developer team and the operating team, I think that serverless actually mandates it. Like, you have no choice. You need to talk to each other. So I think the individual responsibilities change, but teams collaborate more. Okay, now a couple of topics which I think are not something that the other topics are more or less coming, right? We can go through this talk next year and see how much bullshit I said and how much of these things are actually happened. With these, I'm less sure, right? Let's say on the others I would bet, and these I would just bet a beer. Okay. Something, and that's what Erica Windisch said, is try to buy before you build. If you are, you're going through the tutorials on Amazon Lambda, the first thing is authentication, something that you encounter very, very early. There's 2 options currently, 2 bigger options, and the one is you're using it from Amazon directly, Cognito, or you're going to a third party, Auth0. But the point is, you're not writing the authentication itself. There is a service that does that for you, and you need to hook it up in your workflow. But then you get everything with it, right? You get the whole sign-up process, the acknowledgement, 2-factor authentication, all these bells and whistles that you need. And this is just one service, right? But the important piece is that I'm using the authentication service, and again, if I don't know what the number is, but if I have a couple of requests to the authentication service is going to be free. So for me as a developer, for me building a startup, for me evaluating something, whether this works or not, we can discuss whether you want to trust Amazon or not, or which of these services are better. But to start with, I'm going to use that service and build it, and that's it. I'm going to buy it. I'm not going to reinvent it. Right? I'm just going to use an existing service. And if you're in the in the Amazon sphere, you already have the your budget, your constraint, and you could just you're just going to use it because if this service is successful, we can discuss about it, but then it's going to be successful, so it's easy. And if it's not successful, it's not going to be used, so I'm not going to be charged, right? Big changes in the way I think, I'm structuring my software project. And these are going to be on different levels, and I actually have my to-do in my slide, and I want to have more examples in here. But, it starts, with the runtime, with, basic infrastructure things like messaging, data. You can think actually every component of your system, what is my value that I build, and what are parts of the system that I actually should buy in. Something that I'm wondering, you're a big company within Red Hat, and it's what service do I provide, and can I buy these services? Do I really need to implement themselves? The important piece is that it needs to be useful, right? If it doesn't provide any value to it, I'm not going to use it. The important property that is the basis to all this is that it scales down to zero, right? If I'm not going to use that service, I'm not going to buy a plan. If I'm building my MVP and I need, users need to log in, I'm not going to pay a basic plan, 50 euros a month, just someone does the sign up, right? That's stupid. I'm going to build that myself. And it's going to be crappy, but I don't care. Now, if I'm using an existing authentication service and it scales up with the users, great, right? I'm going to use it. So don't reinvent the wheel. No customer cares how great your authentication service is. They expect it. It should be there. No questions asked. There's no value you're adding there. Production-ready releases. And this is, I'm going, a little bit stepping too much out of the window here, I think. But if you're building something in the cloud with serverless, everything is online all the time. And I'm wondering if we should switch our mindset here and say, with everything that I release, it should be production ready. And, certain things of that are there implicitly. So, it scales automatically. And many things are already there. But on the other hand, there are other things that will happen to us. I just, learned the other day that it's they had performance issues with the queues. So the queues were, you have these events, and the events talk to each other, and some of the events are queued, and then these queues filled up. So there is still something that you need to, be aware of and test. But, I think we're with serverless technologies, cloud technologies, we're much faster further down the road in having something, releasing something, and making sure it's ready for production. And if we go back to the original question, I think that's really important. Validating something with the customer. If we need to make sure, if we want to build something and validating with a customer, a lot of people say, especially in the lean startup, right? You build quality software. You test it with unit tests, manual tests, staging, performance tests, security audit, blah, 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 all these things. And then the lean startup guy says, well, you don't know if this thing is getting used. So what did people do? They started, hacking things together and just throw that out. And while I think that's a very valid point, right? Nobody cares about the quality of my piece of code if it gets thrown away next week, if it's not getting used. But, maybe with serverless, if we can get to a habit where even our experiments or even the small things, the small releases are production ready. Which brings me to the next one, ready for experiments. Lean startup, the concierge MVP, they're talking about build, measure, learn. Build something, measure the impact, learn about it, build the next thing. And, they're talking about, depending on the team, but having a continuous life cycle about this. And what I caught thinking is that, with these functions, you now have the ability to on a much more fine granular level, actually evaluate these. And not only, do these, fancy A/B tests on a UI, right? Which button does a customer press? And have these shiny pictures. People people evaluating this conference. Are they going to press a cat button or a dog button? These marketing growth hacks. But more on a functional level, where you can really add functionality and see if you can shift over people and see what happens if you implement a certain functionality. And you can do this in very fine, small, granular steps. There is an event system. You can hook up into the event. You add a little bit of logic to it. I think this is, in the end, the ultimate lean startup supercharger. That your system is basically ready for experiments all the time. And the very last one is business-driven development. And this is combining some of the things that I alluded and talked about before. Is that if you build your system and your individual functions are only you can calculate the costs, and you have some good software development practices and know the way you develop software and can measure that, you measure your lead time, etc., then you can actually, in advance, try to calculate and see what part of the systems are actually worth development. And again, I'm pointing to Simon Wardley, and he wrote about that. He wrote about FinDev, as in financial development, or worth-based development. Is it worth building this application? And this is going to be huge, because now now your talk to your stakeholders, and the stakeholder says, well, I only wanted this, and so you said, well, this is going to cost us this much in implementation because we're rather sure about it. And by the way, during the course of the runtime, it's going to cost us this much. Are you sure we're going to have this many users on it? So that's really far off, but this is going to be really interesting, and it's going to put a lot of pressure on the business people, by the way. All right, so these are my practices, and I think we have 5 minutes or something for questions. So I guess my very first question is does this make sense, or is this guy from Germany talking completely nonsense here over there? Would you say now you can take the hat off and I'm only listening for this? Would you say some of these things would be applicable for you in your work? And if not, why not? And if there are any other questions, please also any other questions. That was just an introduction. Yeah.
You mentioned on a slide that you feel like serverless requires the collaboration between dev and ops. And I was wondering if you could expand on that, because in a certain way it seems like it's abstracting the ops so far away from the actual code. But I was wondering if you could
Yeah, I think good point. And it's and I should and we will rewrite it and define it better. It's about the new roles in DevOps. It's the people who care, who know the limitations of my fast environment, who know the limitations of the queue sizes and the other systems getting encountered, etc. It's not about the sysadmins or the ops people that run the fast and I'm completely with you on that. That's decoupled. Like I don't talk to these anymore, right? This is like I'm throwing over a function, and someone runs it somewhere. Well, I can define it in which region, etc. But yeah, I agree. What I was alluding more to is like I'm a cross-functional team, and some teams I work with, I had the developer and I had the DevOps people who's the canonical example is writing the Docker file, right? He's making sure the patches are always in, it's secure, it's performant, etc. And that role, that person we're not writing Docker files anymore, but I have someone who takes care of all the, still, making sure from the outside the security is running, that the level of performance is still up and running, and I feel that the collaboration is going to be closer in that regard. And it's not too much about throwing over a Docker file and someone else takes care of it. Any other questions? Yeah.
On those slides you were mentioning about keeping teams leading 3-5 people. What point do you consider initial overhead of non-technical people in such cases? Because that comes, speaking of big organizations, not startups, at some point you realize that actually the teams have an overhead of non-technical people while bringing, from a job perspective, a benefit to the organization.
Mm-hmm.
The actual benefit to the product itself is overtime is getting to zero.
Yeah.
How is going with Agile sort of manifesto? We need Scrum Master, we need Program Manager, we need people. They are used to some extent.
So,
we build a product.
Yeah.
Use a hammer to hit the nail.
Yeah. That's a talk by itself. Looking into, and I have a lot of opinions around this, what you could do or whatnot. In this regard, I was talking about a functional, a good running engineering team, and you are going to have a cross-functional team in a sense of Scrum. But there are so many other questions. How do you scale this, and which meetings, and then different people with different roles. That's a talk by itself. How you want to structure teams. At this point, I'm just saying, development teams by themselves, they're shrinking. So I just got their out of time red sign. So I'm going to be here for a couple of minutes, probably outside, so we don't stop for the next talk. So again, here, bit.ly Supercharge with serverless. You see the slides. You can throw in comments. Ping me everywhere. Have a great Sunday. The rest of the conference. Thank you for listening. Matthias. Hi.
I want to invite Robert, software engineer. This concept, how do you see the service level agreement?